Why people moved to the English colonies. Not all colonies were formed for commercial reasons, for money. Some were formed by people who wanted freedom to practice their own religion. Because religion was a serious matter to many people in the 17th century, the king or queen of a country often wanted to control people by controlling their religious loyalties and beliefs. Many European king and queens had been removed from power for religious reasons. For example, throughout the early 1500s, many people in England were Catholic. In 1534, King Henry VIII of England wanted to divorce his wife and marry another woman, but he needed the Pope's approval. The Pope did not agree to Henry's divorce, but Henry divorced her anyway. That caused the Pope and other leaders of the Catholic Church to be angry with Henry. They threatened to throw Henry out of the Catholic Church. In response, King Henry decided to form his own church called the Church of England. Its ritual was similar to the Catholic Church, but its priests lived by different rules, and the King of England was its leader instead of the Pope. King Henry required that everyone in England attend the Church of England. Many people did not want to change their religion. Some wanted to remain Catholic, and others wanted to worship in ways that were different from both the Catholic Church and the Church of England. This section describes colonies formed by Englishmen trying to move to places where they could practice their own religion without interfering from the King and Queen of England. Plymouth Colony. Plymouth Colony was an example of a colony formed to gain religious freedom. Most of the people who colonized Plymouth Colony were called Pilgrims. The Pilgrims were a group of people who believed in worshiping differently than the Church of England. They wanted to separate from the Church of England because its religious rituals seemed too elaborate and fancy, and too similar to the Roman Catholic Church. The Pilgrims wanted to form a church where the ritual was much simpler and closer to the ones described in the Bible. They also wanted to choose their own minister rather than have one appointed by the religious leaders in the Church of England. Church authorities and the English government disliked the Pilgrims. Many Pilgrims had been forced to move from England to Holland to avoid being punished for their religious views. In Holland, the Pilgrims were not able to get good jobs. They did not like the fact that their children were speaking Dutch, the language of Holland. They missed many things about England. When the Pilgrims got a chance to move to an English colony in North America and still have religious freedom, they thought it was a solution to their problem. Solving their problem by moving resulted in more religious freedom for the Pilgrims and allowed them to live in a colony of their own. In 1620, the Pilgrims and some other colonists who were not Pilgrims set sail from England in a ship named the Mayflower. They had an agreement with the Virginia Company to settle on land in the northern part of Virginia colony. However, during their journey, a storm forced the ship off course. The Pilgrims landed hundreds of miles north of Virginia in an area that the Virginia Company did not control. The Pilgrims stayed where they landed because they had arrived in America at the beginning of winter, and the weather made it too dangerous to travel to Virginia. The Pilgrims called their colony the Plymouth Colony. The Plymouth Colony, shown on the map, is well north of Virginia. It is now part of a state called Massachusetts. The Pilgrims had landed hundreds of miles north of Virginia. They had a problem because they did not have the authority or the right to start a colony in that part of America. Before any group of English people could leave England and start a colony, they first had to get the king or queen's permission. The permission was a written document called a charter. A charter was a set of rules that a group had to obey. Those rules describe where the colony could be started, the rights of the people in the new colony, and the laws that they may follow. The English king had given the Pilgrims a charter to go only to the Virginia colony. Because the Pilgrims had strong leaders, they solved their problem of not having a charter by inventing their own set of rules that they had to obey. The Pilgrims called the charter they wrote the Mayflower Compact. The Mayflower Compact allowed the Pilgrims to create their own colonial government and decide what rules the Plymouth colony should follow. The Mayflower Compact was the first attempt by people from England to create their own colonial government in North America. Problems in the Plymouth colony. The Pilgrims and the other colonists faced severe problems during their first year. They arrived in November and the weather was too cold to plant crops. The effect was that nearly half of the colonists died of starvation and disease that first winter. The rest of the colonists were able to survive with the help of some friendly Native Americans and good leadership. In the spring, the colonists planted crops and had a good harvest in the fall. That harvest helped them to survive the coming winter and succeed as a colony. Massachusetts Bay Colony. Another example of a colony that was formed for religious reasons was the Massachusetts Bay Colony. The Massachusetts Bay Colony was composed of a group of people called Puritans. Like the Pilgrims, the Puritans were also unhappy with the Church of England. Unlike the Pilgrims, the Puritans did not want to separate from the Church of England. They wanted to purify the religious practices of the Church. However, church authorities rejected their ideas. The Puritans were punished for their religious beliefs, and some feared for their lives in England. Many of the Puritans thought the solution to their problem was to form a colony of their own in North America. Most of the Puritans were merchants, farmers, landowners, or businessmen, but not members of the English nobility. They formed the Massachusetts Bay Company to run the colony. King Charles of England gave them a charter, and the company sent approximately 1,000 colonists to America in 1630. The Puritans settled 40 miles north of the Plymouth colony and called their colony the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Its capital was Boston. At first, the Puritan colonists were governed by the Massachusetts Bay Company, which consisted of only a few people. Eventually, the colonists wanted more control of their local government, so the company gave Puritan men who owned land the right to vote at town meetings. At the town meetings, Puritan men elected officers who met and made decisions about their town. Later, Puritan men won the right to elect a governor and representatives to make the laws of the colony. Allowing all male Puritan landowners to vote in town meetings and to elect officials contributed to self-government in the colonies. By coming to America, the Puritans found freedom to practice their own religion. However, the Puritans did not believe in tolerating other religious beliefs. People who had different religious beliefs were not welcome in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. People who were not Puritans had no voice in the Massachusetts Bay Colony government. They could not attend town meetings or vote for the governor and representatives of the colony. The Puritans also required everyone who lived in the Massachusetts Bay Colony to attend the Puritan church and behave in Puritan ways. That caused a problem for people who did not want to worship like the Puritans or to live like the Puritans. Rhode Island Colony. One person who did not want to worship like the Puritans was Roger Williams. Roger Williams was a Puritan minister, but unlike most Puritans, he did not believe that the government of the Massachusetts Bay Colony had the right to force people to attend the Puritan church. Williams' speeches against the Puritan beliefs made him unpopular with the Massachusetts Bay Colony officials, such as Governor John Winthrop and other religious leaders. In 1636, Williams and a group of friends moved about 50 miles away from the Massachusetts Bay Colony in order to avoid punishment. William and his friends formed the town of Providence. Gradually, other people who disagreed with the strict laws of the Puritans left the Massachusetts Bay Colony and formed 3 other towns near Providence. While Roger Williams and his followers solved their religious problems, the move created other problems. One problem was that they needed to protect themselves from unfriendly Native Americans who did not want a growing English population spreading through their territory. The town of Providence and the 3 other towns wanted to form a colony, but they needed England's permission to do this. In 1644, England allowed them to become their own colony. The 4 towns joined together to become the colony of Rhode Island. Like the Puritans and the Pilgrims before them, Roger Williams and his followers had moved and formed a new colony to gain religious freedom. The colonists of Rhode Island elected Roger Williams as their first governor. He solved the problem of religious freedom by allowing colonists to worship as they chose. Williams believed that church and government should be separate. Because of those laws, the government